Welcome to the Fill Your Cups podcast. If you're listening to this episode, take a screenshot right now and put it on your Instagram or Facebook story and tag us at Fill Your Cups podcast so we can see who's listening.
Now, on to the serious stuff. Do you find yourself feeling defensive and needing to explain yourself constantly?
Are you always looking for someone else to blame?
Does your day get easily ruined by small things?
Are you constantly wondering what someone meant when they said that thing to you earlier?
If so, you might be taking things a little too personally or struggling with the victim mindset. Us too. Today, we're going to be talking about all the ways we tend to take things too personally, why we take things so personally, and how we can ask better questions to combat that so we don't slip into the victim mindset cycle. Let's dive right in. So, what are you drinking?
I have a strawberry vanilla Olipop. I love these things. What about you?
Delicious. I'm just drinking my water, but it does have one of those flavor packets in there. So,
ooh, yummy. What flavor?
I think it's a pink lemonade.
Nice.
Pretty solid.
Well, we hope you all are drinking something fun. We are starting with our shout out as usual. This week we are shouting out K Rainey 2. Apple podcast user who gave us 5 stars, thank you, and said, after listening, I feel like I just left a coffee shop or happy hour of quality time and nonstop chatting with my best friends. And really, she did, because she's my best friend. I know who this is.
We love you.
Yeah, so thank you, Kristen, so much. And if you want your review read on a future podcast episode, please leave us one on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, and maybe you'll be the next one that we read.
Yes, we love to see those come through. It's such an energy booster and such a cup filler for our days. It's so exciting to see your guys' words of affirmation. So thanks for everyone who has left a review and anyone who might leave a review after this one.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. So today we are talking about how to ditch that victim mindset and stop taking things so dang personally. Which I feel like we came to think about this because, well, really it was my idea, I think.
Mm-hmm. It was a great idea, though.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like this is such a strong tendency for me. I battle it pretty regularly, I would say daily even. And even though I'm still working on this daily, there are some things that I have stacked up in my brain over the years from various podcasts, books, conversations with friends, just different things that I feel like are helping me grow in this. And even if it's just a small growth, I want to share it. Mm-hmm. So I also think it's something that we kind of adopt unintentionally, and especially if through childhood, if you experience someone that models this in your life, it can be really hard to even realize that we're doing it, let alone kicking it, to the curb.
Yeah.
So for me, I will say just like a real-time example of this, just to show you how frequently this impacts me, is that Jared and I, we walk our dog every morning and afternoon. I feel like I always talk about one of our walks on these podcasts.
It's a daily thing for you.
Yeah. So recently I was talking about the podcast actually, and I was talking about our website, and I was like really frustrated with something. Jared's a software developer, so he probably does know better than me, but I was realizing that I was talking about something and he was saying these things that he knows about websites or suggestions that he had or whatever, and I was really frustrated, and all of a sudden I could just tell that I was taking things way too personally, like he was attacking me, like I didn't know what I was doing, or I felt really stupid or something like that. And it wasn't because of anything that he was saying. He wasn't saying I was stupid or anything like that.
Right. To him, he was being helpful.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And so that has obviously happened recently because the podcast is recent. And so it's something that I'm really having to pay attention to regularly. And I think for those of us who have this tendency to take things super personally or to feel like a victim, it is something that is really hard to work on, but it's still important to work on because it can really enhance our relationships, make us feel way more empowered, and just feel better about our lives.
Yeah, definitely. I noticed that I do this a lot too. So it's funny that we're having this podcast episode because I realized I was doing it when it's so bad, but we got these like new stainless steel pans, and he's the cook in our house. I'm not really the cook. I don't like to
Same.
cook. Yeah, so but I had cooked something and he had asked me not to use metal on the stainless steel because it
Yeah.
scratches it. And I immediately was like, I didn't. Yes, I did. To me, it wasn't even me lying. It was just me being like, no, I didn't. Like, I know what I'm doing. And it's like, no. But also, he wasn't even saying anything to me to make me take offense. I just automatically went on the offense.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like there are two types of victims,
Okay.
and there's two types of ways that you can kind of look at it with taking things personally. I feel like there's a person who, like me, says, no, it isn't my fault. I didn't do this. Someone else is to blame. And then there's a type of person who says, no matter what I do, bad things happen, or I just don't know why these things keep happening to me.
Yeah,
I
it's
feel
just
like
one thing after the other.
one thing after another. Yeah, so I feel like once you can kind of realize
Which one you fall into.
which one you are, yeah, it's easier to recognize those examples in your life, and you're like, wow, you realize you do it a lot more often than you should. Or maybe it's just us. Maybe we just take everything personally.
I was about to be like,
But-
what if the answer is all of the above?
yeah. I fit into both.
I do think that, again, like I said, I've been working on this for a long time, so I feel like I'm definitely better than I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think my tendency is more of the no matter what I do, bad things happen to me.
Mm.
And I know I've shared this with you before, but there's this moment that I always remember from when Jared and I first got married, and we were living in an apartment, and we didn't even have a kitchen table, so we were eating dinner at our coffee table, and we had something with ketchup on the plate. I don't even remember what we were eating, but I remember the ketchup. And the ketchup, like, somehow I dropped the plate and ketchup got all over the floor, and I flipped my shit. I was raging. Oh my God, whatever. And I just remember Jared being so kind of shocked, honestly. Like, maybe he was like second guessing his decision.
Oh my God.
Just kidding. But I remember him being kind of shocked, and then immediately, which this did not help in the moment, but immediately being like, it's just ketchup. And I was like, oh my God, you don't even know. And there were, for whatever reason, I just felt like so many bad things had happened to me all day, and the ketchup was just the cherry on top and whatever. And he was like, you might feel a little bit less stressed if you just didn't worry so much about things like ketchup. It's just and in the moment I was like, you're not even letting me feel anything, and whatever. It was definitely something that I was experiencing the victim mindset with. But I always remember that moment, because later I reflected on it and I was like, yeah, why do I get so upset about shit like that?
It's hard not to sometimes whenever you are feeling so overwhelmed, but that's where recognizing it and knowing kind of how to get past that can come in handy, because otherwise you're just going to be on this angry roller coaster forever. And people aren't going to know what to do with you.
Seriously, yeah, it really affects your relationships.
It really does. I think that it can definitely put a huge strain on your relationships, especially if you always find yourself kind of going into things on high alert of, what are they going to say that's going to hurt my feelings? Or are they picking on me, or what are they saying about me? Like, especially if you're going into things like that, it can be really hard, and people can then kind of walk on eggshells around you.
Yeah.
And it can make it hard to have like a real relationship with these people. And so I think that knowing that you do that, and just knowing how much of a relationship strain it can put on, it can be really hard not to sometimes.
Yeah, so I feel like we kind of wanted to break this down into, because when we started to talk about it, taking things personally and being in the victim mindset are similar things, but a little bit different. So I know sometimes we struggle a little bit more with just the taking things personally. Sometimes we're in a whole victim mindset where it's an entire mindset shaping what we're going through life with at that moment. So first, I feel like we wanted to talk about two different categories of taking things personally. So we're moving into the how to get past this, how to work on this,
how to stop doing this.
Yes, exactly. How to figure out habits that keep me from doing this, or eliminating these bad habits that keep me in this state. So two categories of taking things personally. So I feel like there's the side of things when we are just reading into little things, or we're making big deals of little things, that just small things, even something that someone says that really is not a big deal, does not even necessarily apply to you, but something that you truly are taking personally. This is maybe like a you problem, not a them problem.
Yeah.
And then there's the category when someone actually does say something that's hurtful, and how to not let that impact you so deeply, and figuring out why does it feel so personal, even if they didn't mean it that way. So talking about both of these, I liked the idea, I've heard this a lot, but asking better questions. Yes. So I often find myself when I'm assuming someone's intention, I get in this pattern of attaching some sort of made up meaning to whatever they're saying. So like in the Jared example earlier with the website thing, for some reason I was just feeling like, oh, he thinks I'm dumb. Oh, he doesn't think I'm capable. Oh, he doesn't think I can do this. And he didn't say any of that.
Right.
You know,
and nor did he mean any of that or think any of that.
Right. I just was reading between the lines where there weren't any spaces to be
Where
read. Yeah. Yeah. And so I feel like attaching meaning to something silly that is a lot more, that's a way deeper meaning to think that he's saying that I'm dumb or incapable than to just say, oh, I have this idea, And I think we talked about that with the pans example too.
Because I had thought to myself, like, you have to ask the better questions, so you have to ask the clarifying questions. Yeah. And then you have to be able to kind of take a moment and realize what they are actually saying. So are they actually saying something to you that is hurting your feelings, or are they saying something like in the moment with Mason about the pans where he asked me to stop using metal on metal? Instead, he wasn't saying like, hey, you can't cook, and hey, you're stupid for not doing this. He was saying, hey, I would like it if these did not get ruined. And instead of me saying, that's a totally reasonable request, and that's something that you're feeling, instead I said, well, you're hurting my feelings. Yeah. And that's not what he was saying. And so if I had continued to go on the personal offense with that, that's an example of someone has to then walk on eggshells around you, because then he doesn't feel comfortable in the future telling me something that may have impacted him, because I can only think about myself in that situation.
I feel like a lot of the time when someone is saying something to us that's for whatever reason really hurting our feelings, a lot of the time it doesn't even really have to do with us. Like, especially if it's something small like that. I can even think of examples. This shows you how silly my brain is sometimes. But like, where sometimes people are talking about things that they think are cute, like outfits or things like that, and or things that they think are ugly. And all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh, I like that, or oh, I don't like that, or whatever. And so they must think that my taste in fashion is ugly or unfashionable or whatever. Yes. And someone having an opinion, like say that I have a dress, someone having an opinion about the dress doesn't mean that the dress is ugly. It means that their opinion of the dress is that it's ugly.
And that you guys have different tastes, and like that is okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's not like they're looking at me and being like, your outfit sucks.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So I feel like sometimes these little things, you just have to remind yourself, what meaning am I attaching to this? And were they even saying anything about me? Because more than likely, they are not.
No, they're not. They're just speaking to you because they feel as though they can.
Yeah, and not for long if you keep it up.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, so I feel like with these little things, really the important question to start asking is, what meaning am I attaching to this? How can I listen better to what they're actually saying rather than involving my own thoughts and feelings into it? And then asking yourself, or stopping asking the bad question, which is, what does this mean about me? Yeah. That's kind of the question that I feel like seeps in, and it's like it really doesn't mean much about you.
Yeah, you almost kind of have to figure out where that trigger is coming from, of why am I taking that so personally. So I know for me, when I realized I was taking the blame, or no, not taking the blame for anything, and I was always passing on the blame, I realized that it comes from me being so scared to get in trouble. I'm so scared to get in trouble. I'm so scared to get yelled at. So I would rather just never, ever take responsibility for things. So then it's not my problem.
Yeah.
I didn't do it. So you can't yell at me because it wasn't me. And it's a bad cycle because then it has to be one of us. It has to be me or Mason. And obviously it wasn't him. It's a situation like that where I need to start taking the responsibility for it, because that is so much better than just being scared of getting in trouble.
Yeah.
Like being able to figure out what those triggers are.
Yeah, this is dumb, but it reminds me of, you know how there's always the guy, we play sand volleyball, and you know how there's always the guy or girl who, no matter where it actually falls, they call in or out based on what it would mean for their team to get a point.
Oh, yes.
I hate that person.
They're the worst.
They're always like pointing in when it was like a mile out.
That's just no integrity.
I know.
I hate those people.
I know. Yeah, but not saying that I hate you. But
no. Yeah,
so
no,
silly.
it's very similar. It really is. They're the worst.
Yeah. So I feel like those are the little things, and then there's kind of the bigger things, the things that are a little bit deeper, possibly when someone actually does something hurtful. And I feel like there are a lot of really good questions, better questions that you can ask yourself, rather than just like, why did they say that to me, or why do they feel that way about me, or things like that we can ask ourselves. So one of the first things for me that I have to evaluate is like, where is this coming from? Okay. Why does this hurt so much? And a lot of the time, it's funny that you say that you get worried about being in trouble or something like that, because I feel like I worry a lot about people's perception of me being capable or smart or like that sort of thing. I'm like, oh, they just think I'm dumb. They just must think that I'm dumb, or they just must, whatever it is. They just must think this, and figuring out where that hurt is laying. It's not always in that, but it could be that, or it could be in any of the other meanings I'm attaching, but figuring out why that hurts so much.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is really important to know why that is happening to you. I also think that you kind of have to ask yourself, what if this is the best that they can do? Yeah. What if they don't have the resources and they didn't listen to this episode, so they don't know that they're like addressing things incorrectly, or they don't know those things. I know that you said to me a long time ago, and it has made such a difference for me, but you said what makes sense to them might not make sense to you, but that is how their brain is working. That is how it makes sense to them. And it seriously changed my mindset.
That was something I heard at like a church retreat or something, and it changed my life.
I'm so glad that you heard it, and then you could tell me, because it really did change things. It made it so that way, if I am in a store and a cashier doesn't tell me to have a good day, a couple years ago that might have really offended me, and I might have been like, wow, what a bitch. But now I'm like, she might not be feeling good, or man, what if she just had a really bad customer right before me? Or it might not even be anything serious like that, but she just might not like talking to people. Why am I taking offense to that? I don't know. So I think that reframing it in that way of, it makes sense to them, it might not make sense to you, but it makes sense to them, that I think that really changes the game.
Yeah.
It really does.
This is kind of tangential, but I also think that learning about personalities like Enneagram and stuff like that is really, which we can talk about those maybe in the future, but learning more about how other people think and what makes them make decisions can help you a lot too, because the way that you make decisions is a lot different than the way that I make decisions.
Yeah.
Even though someone might seem very similar to you, or like even be in the same life stage as you, what they're doing could look very different, and you're like, what the fuck? Like, why are they doing that? You know, it doesn't make any sense. But I do think that just knowing the differences in how people operate can help a lot with this, and just reminding yourself, what makes sense to them might not make sense to me, but for some reason it makes sense in their brain.
Yeah. I feel like that could go back to the asking better questions.
Yeah.
Of just so realizing that it might not make sense to you, but it makes sense to them. And then just asking better questions along the lines of, I saw a TikTok that it was like these this couple had been married for 40 years, and they asked what the secret was, and she said, sometimes I have to ask him, like, hey, what makes sense to your brain is not making sense to my brain. Can your brain explain it to my brain? And I thought that was so smart, and I immediately sent it to Mason, and I was like, this is genius, because if you're ever getting in situations like that where, like, so many times I feel like things that you're taking personally, it's really just a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
You're just, like, we're just not hearing each other clearly. So being able to ask the question of, I'm sorry, like, can you clarify, or can you make that make sense to my brain? Like,
yeah.
I think that is such a smart thing to do, and it's something that I've started doing when I'm like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, when I can feel myself, I'm fired up because, like, what? Why would you say this? Or like, oh, why would you do this?
Yeah.
I can figure out what's really going on and be like, wait. Why did you do that?
Yeah.
What's the steps that you took to get there?
Yeah, definitely. I think another good question that we talked about was, does the intensity of this reaction match the intensity of what happened? So this is really tough for me sometimes because, catch-up example, the intensity of my reaction did not match the intensity of what happened. The intensity of what happened was like a 0.5 on a scale of 10.
Yes.
And my reaction was like a 10 on a scale of 10.
Yes.
So I think sometimes just reminding yourself, okay, does this situation actually call for a 10 out of 10 reaction? Does that make sense? And then again, that can lead, if the answer is no, you're overreacting possibly, then going back to that question about, okay, why am I overreacting? Like, what is going on underneath? What's going
what's
on
really happening in there?
Yeah,
definitely. I think that could also go with kind of learning how to separate your emotions a bit. So with you saying, am I overreacting? Let's go back to what's really happening. It's important to be able to distinguish what is happening within your emotions. So you're mad because you're overstimulated at work. That doesn't mean you need to be mad about ketchup spilling, kind of. You know what I mean? So being able to separate those emotions and figure out why it's hurting so bad or why you had such a intense immediate reaction. I think that can help going forward if you're able to recognize and learn and start separating your emotions.
Yeah.
I think that
agree.
helped me a lot when I was a little bit younger. It helped me a lot for sure.
I feel like the last thing that you can do, if it is in this category of someone hurting you or you feeling hurt by someone that you love, is you could, not in the heat of the moment. This is not the type of thing I'm talking about. But if you're sitting there, you're dwelling on something that someone said to you that you're close with or whatever, and it really does feel like it hurt. And for whatever reason, you're just taking this very personally. You feel very sensitive about it. In that situation, there is a possibility that it makes sense to bring it up to them.
Yeah.
And just be totally forward about it. I had to do this recently, to be honest. And just be like, hey, I was feeling really, really sensitive about this. It could totally be that I'm just taking this too personally, but I wanted to talk with you about it because I've been thinking about it a lot, and I was this is what I was feeling like. Maybe you were thinking about me, what were you actually thinking about me, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like in the scenario where you've gone through all these questions, you're assessing yourself, really, you're reflecting inward, and that is still not okay, and you feel like
still stewing.
Yeah, and you feel like there is a safe space for you to be able to talk to them about it, then I feel like kind of final step for that one better question would be to ask them to talk to them about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that what you were saying with being really vulnerable in the moment whenever you are asking that question, it might feel uncomfortable for you, but it probably is important to let that person know how you were feeling really deep down. It did make me feel stupid, or it made me feel like you were saying that I was lazy or anything like that. It can help that person hear that and say, I was not trying to say, or hopefully they weren't trying to say any of those things.
Yeah.
But being really vulnerable in the moment of telling them how you actually felt once you've recognized how you actually feel can help move that conversation in the way it was supposed to go, or move the point that person was trying to make in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, I was going to say on the flip side of this, if you are a person who is going into conversations and you might know that someone could take things a little bit personally, or there's someone who's maybe like a highly sensitive person. Like I have a friend who anytime I'm going to say something, I'm like, it's going to sound bad what I'm saying, but it's not. Like I'm saying this with the best intentions. I'm saying this with only love in my heart for you. It's just a kind of serious thing to say. Sometimes I'll literally preface it.
You're actually really good at that. Now that you say
you.
it, I've never really thought about it, but you're really good at prefacing your thoughts to make them the least aggressive that they could be.
Thank you. I really try to do that because I think I realized how personally I start taking things. So then I felt like if I could flip it and I could start prefacing things or letting people know before the words even come out of my mouth, before they have a chance to take something personally, I can let them know, like, take your guard down because this is not supposed to be personal. Yeah. I love you so deeply. It'll be things like that. Yeah. Or I know I talk about Mason a lot on here. I'm sorry, guys. I spend 98% of my time with him. But I will tell him if I have something to say that I think that he could potentially take personally, I'll tell him, hey, not an attack on you at all. This is just a thought I was having. And then it opens up the moment for him to ask me a better question if he needs to. And so I feel like if you can kind of lead a conversation and you can be the one who starts that, maybe you could start that trend, you know?
Yeah. It kind of reminds
will pick up
me
on it.
of, I don't know if you remember this, but there were specific types of papers in English. I think it was like argumentative or persuasive or something like that. And a lot of teachers would require that you pick like the opposite of your argument.
Oh, yeah.
And acknowledge it and then argue against it.
Yeah.
It's almost like that, like figuring out, okay, what would their opposite point of view potentially be, the worst point of view could potentially be, and how do I acknowledge that but be like, that's not what's happening here.
Yeah, and be like, but this is what I have to say, not against you.
Yeah.
It's just my own thoughts and a conversation.
Yeah.
I think that can be important.
I like that. Yeah. No, you are really good at doing that now that I think of it.
Thank you.
I feel like we can move into more of the victim mindset. So taking things personally, I feel like we talk about more are those acute moments, and victim mindset's almost like a chronic thing, you know?
Yeah.
So taking things personally, you could be doing that every so often or whatever. But a victim mindset is kind of like you go through your day and you feel like the whole day is just against you. You know, everybody's against you. So I feel like we can still ask better questions. For instance, when we say something like, oh, why does this always happen to me? Or why do only bad things happen to me? I always feel like when I start to get that way, I'm like, really? Does it always happen to you? Come on. And I think I've talked about this in other episodes, but paying attention to the language we're using is really helpful.
Yes.
Because saying things like always, never, all the time, you know, things like that are usually not super helpful in moving forward because
it's probably not true.
It's rarely. Notice I said rarely and not never.
There you go.
But
not
rarely ever true. But yeah, sometimes I'm like, just because you spilled your coffee on yourself does not mean the whole day is ruined.
Yeah.
It's 8 a.m. The whole day has yet
It hasn't even started.
Yeah. So I feel like that's one thing with the victim mindset is paying attention to that language, because when you eliminate it and you start using different words or asking better questions, you can view it more neutrally, maybe even positively, but even just neutral would be better than that victim.
Yeah, than going on the offense.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I definitely think that's very true.
Something else is that you might not be able to change what's happening, but you can definitely change how you think about what's happening. So even if you're experiencing something that's out of your control, like traffic or something like that, you definitely can change how you think about what's happening. If traffic's crazy and you're like, oh my God, everybody's cutting me off, or everybody always cuts me off, or I always get stuck in traffic, and you know, whatever. It's just taking more control of your thoughts and thinking, you know, how can I, let's say, like, maximize this time? I can listen to the Fill Your Cups podcast, you know, or just, you know, I don't really know how to explain that, but
no, I know what you're saying.
When something is out of your control, maybe you can't control that, but you can control your thoughts and your feelings about that.
Yes, absolutely. It's kind of funny that we're doing this episode because I am reading The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And have you ever read that?
Yeah, I haven't in a long time.
Okay.
I need to reread it.
Yeah, so I just started reading it. So I'm literally on chapter 2. So I'm I'm not an expert or anything. But I thought it was crazy because in the first chapter, he says, if you can just limit what you give a fuck about, then like you just won't be so angry and so personally victimized and like feel all these hard feelings, because if you just don't give a fuck, then like it's so much easier to not care. So when you're sitting in traffic, why are we like gripping the steering wheel until our knuckles are white because we're so mad? Like why do we care so much about this?
Definitely. And then there are things that we can control.
There's so many things we can control. I honestly feel like most things can be controlled. And that might be ignorant of me to say. It probably is. But I really do feel like most things can be controlled. Like if you had a cavity or something and you've had it for so long and you're so mad that it hurts so bad and you're so mad that you can't get in the dentist anywhere, but you've been waiting for 5 months already. Like if you would have just made that appointment 5 months ago, you'd be in.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of things are like that. I feel like a question that I have to remind myself to ask is, what can I own here? And that does come into play with things that you are in control of, because victim mindsets, you are automatically on this autopilot where you assume you have no power of the situation.
Yeah.
You're out of control. You don't. Everything else in the world is in charge of how your day goes, whatever. But if you instead ask, what can I own here? And what do I have control over? It gives you just so much more power back. I feel like it just allows you to feel more free. Because if you're trapped by thinking that everything is out of your control, then you're
just stuck.
You're stuck. You're imprisoned. You have no freedom. You're giving the world you're saying, here you go.
Yeah.
Here's my life. Take it. Do what you want with it.
Yeah.
You are not in control of your
No,
own
you're
life.
just letting things happen to you.
Yeah. So I feel like these questions hopefully will help people in just asking better questions when they're realizing sometimes I go through seasons. Like sometimes I'm better about being in a balanced state of mind and not taking things so personally or not being in a victim mindset. But then sometimes I realize, oh my gosh, I'm way more touchy right now.
Yeah.
And have to figure out why that is, and then kind of run through these questions a bit. And obviously, like I said, I was touchy about something the other day. So
ongoing process.
I still am working on it, and I don't think that we have to be 100% perfect at it in order to.
No, you won't be. You're still a human.
Yeah,
You still have raw emotions that are going to come out no matter what.
Yeah.
And you still have triggers that even though you try so hard to work past them, they're still going to come up. So it's impossible to be perfect.
So I feel like in closing, I feel like if you struggle with this, the important thing is don't beat yourself up about it. Welcome to the club. There's 7 billion of us, or how many humans are there? I don't know.
I don't even know. Too many.
Instead, we can use it as awareness to help us go through life with more compassion for ourselves and for others. And I feel like every time you pause to ask better questions and reframe your thinking or alter your beliefs, you are making improvements in your mindset, no matter how slowly.
So guys, if while you were listening to this, you felt like this was a good podcast to share, we would love that. We want you to share it with your friends, share it with your hubbies, share it with your coworkers, whoever you feel like might get something out of this episode. And if you felt personally victimized by this episode, then send it to someone and say, hey, I felt personally victimized and you might too. It maybe preface it if you're sending it to them as well. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. It reminds me of Regina George.
Yeah. I was personally victimized. Also, next week is July 1st, and it is halfway through the year. So we're going to be doing a mid-year check-in, kind of going over some goals, some habits, and what we can do to make the second half of this year even better than the first half. So we hope you join us next week.
Yeah, see you there.
Cheers!
Cheers!